Wrestling fans, if you like what you've seen, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and also don't forget to ring that bell.
Do you miss the golden era of professional wrestling? Wrestling fans, it's time to bring those memories back to life. To take you back to the legendary arenas, the chair shots, the foreign objects, good versus evil, all the heroes you loved, and the villains you love to hate, and the blood. Guiding us on this journey through professional wrestling history, IBW Hall of Famers Supermouth Dave Drayson and Terry Sullivan. International Big-Time Wrestling and RoX-TV proudly presents Big Time Memories.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Terry Sullivan along with Dave Drayson. This is Big Time Memories, going back into the time machine from some of the all-time greats in the world of professional wrestling here in Detroit in the Midwest from back in the 70s.
Yeah, we've been exploring the whole territory, the greats who worked here, the ones that gave us all these memories. And, if you haven't seen all our shows, be sure to subscribe to RoX-TV and see all the episodes. Go back and watch them. We're having so much fun doing them.
And today is certainly no exception. One of the most prestigious wrestlers we've ever dealt with, one of the most highly regarded and biggest stars in terms of money making and a draw at the box office, Johnny Valentine.
Yeah, not only here in Big Time Wrestling, but all over the world.
Yeah.
John Wisniewski is his real name. Nice Polish.
Yeah.
And he was born September 22nd, 1928 in Maple Valley, Washington. And over time, he made his wrestling debut in 1947 versus Karol Nowima.
Yeah.
But of all places, he's making his debut in Buenos Aires, Argentina.
And it occurred to me we got to find out exactly how that happened and what may have been the explanation there. Johnny was trained by a couple of guys who were very famous back in the 30s and 40s, Wladek and Stanislaus Zbyszko, where Larry Zbyszko got his name. And a gentleman who wrestled occasionally as their cousin, used the ring name Karol Zbyszko. His real name was Karol Nowina. And he went down to Buenos Aires to promote that country. And that's how Johnny made his debut. He was being trained by the supposed cousins. Now there he is.
Got to start somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he, from there, he made his name known throughout the country. I remember, seeing programs of him in California in the 1950s. I recognize him, but he had a cowboy hat on, and he wasn't Johnny Valentine. Right. He was Cowboy Rocky Valentine.
Odd, because he was Johnny Valentine everywhere else, but out there they wanted a cowboy.
Yeah, and he just traveled the country, just everywhere, every territory from, the Northwest, Southeast, Texas.
He was everywhere. He really was.
The amazing thing about Johnny Valentine, throughout his whole career, no matter what territory he went to, he always held either the singles championship or the tag team championships belts. Over the years, the list is, longer than my two arms put together, the titles that gentleman held.
One of the reasons I think is that Johnny was so believable as an athlete in the ring. You couldn't help but watch this guy and go, wow, this guy is really inflicting pain and punishment.
Yeah, he made his Detroit debut, February 12th, 1961, against Angelo Savoldi. And the old guys, that he went against back then, just like you said, he was a brute. He lived for pain, and he loved to dish it out too.
Yeah, and that's legit.
Yeah, those big forearm smashes, everybody, talks about that. And Johnny Valentine in the ring, he wanted to receive that same, treatment back. And there's been times, in the Kobo ring and being a photographer and being right up there, sometimes you can hear the little chitter chatter between, opponents. And sometimes, a guy would hit Johnny and I can hear him go, hit it harder. Hit me harder. And it's like, boy, if you didn't, he gave it to you.
Yeah. Yeah. That was what it was all about. He was known, as you said, for the big forearm smashes where he'd lay the opponent out over the top rope and look up at the crowd and boom.
Oh, boy, yeah.
Cave that chest
especially
in.
those green rookies, boy. They really paid for it back then. But a Johnny Valentine match, not like unlike today where you see all these high flyers and it's all high spots. Boom, 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 boom. Johnny Valentine, when he wrestled, he always starts slow, very slow. Sometimes he could work an arm lock for 5 or 10 minutes in the middle of the ring.
At least.
And have fans, into what he was doing.
Yeah.
He was building up, trying to tell the story.
Right.
And he told a story throughout every match
Yeah.
that I've ever seen him. Yeah. He'd start slow, he'd build it up, but when it came to that crescendo, all hell would break loose.
Yeah. And one of the hallmarks of his matches, he did start slow, as you said, and was long matches, 30, 45 minutes, 60 minutes, and he would keep the crowd throughout that time limit.
Yeah. And Johnny Valentine came to Bigtime Wrestling. Bigtime Wrestling, not Detroit, because he made his debut here in the 50s, but he beat Fritz von Erich for the United States Heavyweight Championship on October 19th, 1963, when Jim Barnett and Johnny Doyle still ran the promotion here.
Fritz von Erich was just a huge star, the father of the von Erich boys.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, the claw. Oh, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I used to see that, boy, when he'd clamp that on somebody, it's like, good night, nurse. That was the end. But, when the Sheik bought the territory and switched the, territory name to Big Time Wrestling, not long after he purchased it, he ended up beating Johnny Valentine for that title on February 6th, 1965. And the ironic thing about that, the Sheik held that title for so many years, only being beaten once by Bobo Brazil. But then Johnny Valentine made his return to Big Time Wrestling in late 1972 and through 1973. And he ended up beating the Sheik for the title that he once held on July 7th, 1973. Unfortunately, the Sheik beat him 2 weeks later on July 21st to regain the title when he threw the fire at Johnny.
One of the interesting things about that series of matches between the Sheik and Johnny Valentine was that was the middle of a streak of 7 consecutive sellouts.
Yep.
Totally sold out, turn them away at the Kobo Arena, which held 12,000.
Yeah, a little over 12,000, but and the fans that they ended up turning away, that lined up Jefferson Avenue who couldn't get in.
Yeah.
And when I say that the Sheik threw the fire at him, Johnny Valentine supposedly was in the hospital for months and away from Big Time Wrestling. But the thing was, right after that match, that, on July 21st match where the Sheik won the title, threw the fire at him, July 22nd, I flew out to L.A. where I started working for the L.A. office, for a short time.
Uh-huh.
And coming in that Wednesday, who shows up but Johnny Valentine? And he looks at me, I see him, and he, what are you doing here? And it's like, well, I'm working for the office out here for a while. And he was on his way to Japan, which, explains why, he left Big Time Wrestling and the Sheik threw the fire. And, maybe sometime when he comes back, a big buildup for his return.
Another big feud he had in this area that a lot of fans might be aware of was with Johnny Powers. And in the Buffalo, Cleveland area of the country, JV went against Johnny Powers, beat him for the NWF North American title. The big Parade of Champions was headlined by Powers and Valentine. That was held at Cleveland Stadium in 1972.
Right, that was a big show. I remember because a lot of the guys that were on that show ended up working Kobo that same night because that was an afternoon show at the ballpark.
Yeah, yeah.
But when after he returned from Japan, did some more work in California and then in Washington, he ended up making his return to Big Time Wrestling. And when he came out of that tunnel, you know, for his first match back, he got a standing ovation. I remember that to this day.
And along those lines, I can remember how clearly he presented himself to the fans as he walked out. He really didn't acknowledge the fans. He had the big, long, floor-length robe on, got up to the steps leading up to the ring at the Kobo Arena, got onto the first step and stopped.
Yep.
And ever so slowly turned his head and acknowledged the people. He let the robe fall off, and I can remember so clearly looking at him, his entire body was goosebumps. No lie.
Yeah,
Really
he was
incredible.
Excited to return to Big Time Wrestling. And when he finally did get his chance to go up against the Sheik in revenge for throwing the fire at him, just like Bull Curry did once before, Johnny Valentine wore an asbestos mask.
Well, there you go.
You know, to combat, you know, the Sheik throwing the fire at him.
Yeah.
And that night, Johnny Valentine regained the United States heavyweight title.
Do you know he was a really smart guy? Very intelligent man, master of chess, lover of classical music.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, very smart guy, which he didn't, was not something he, you know, really advertised all that much. He didn't have a whole lot to say, ever, to people.
I didn't know that. You know, some things that, you know, wrestlers hide away from, you know, being when you're with them at the arena and in the dressing room and sometimes on the road, you know, their life away from wrestling.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes, you know, it's
no
mind-boggling of what, you know, some of these guys do.
Yeah.
But Johnny's last match in Detroit was July 19th, 1975. And that's so significant because, again, just like, you know, when I saw him in in LA, in California, like a week after he was burnt by the Sheik, I saw Johnny Valentine down in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Right.
A week after, you know, his last appearance in Detroit for Big Time Wrestling. It was at a time when I was, you know, starting my managing career, and I went down there because in Charlotte, they didn't have any managers at that time. And my good friend Sonny King lived there, and he says, hey, why don't you come down here, live with me, and I'm going to try to get you a job, you know, with the Jim Crockett promotion.
Right.
But George Scott, who was the booker there, says, you know, we don't need any managers at this time, you know, sorry. And, you know, I ended up staying there, you know, 2-3 months with Sonny. We had a great time. And, you know, I got to see Johnny Valentine, you know, once again.
You know, one of the interesting things about Johnny, which illustrates his stature in the business, when he was wrestling full-time, based in Charlotte at that point in time, but it was also doing fly-ins to Houston, Detroit, and St. Louis. All the big shows. He was that just, you know, special caliber of athlete who was able to do that.
And it wasn't long, you know, after, you know, I went down there and I was coming back home, 3 months almost to the day of his last appearance for Big Time Wrestling here, tragedy struck Johnny Valentine. You know, he was in a plane with David Crockett, Tim Woods, who was Mr. Wrestling, Bob Bruggers, and Ric Flair.
Yeah.
And they were flying in this plane, and they came up short of the runway. And
Ran out of gas, didn't they?
Yeah, because they had to drop some of the gas on their original takeoff from Charlotte to Wilmington, North Carolina, because the boys and their stuff that was too heavy.
Jeez.
And within I wasn't even a mile from the runway of the airport that the plane went down. And in doing so, everybody was injured. The pilot died from his injuries, but Johnny Valentine broke his back, and it ended his in-ring wrestling career.
Yeah. And at the time, there was no insurance settlement. There was no lawsuit, nothing like that. Huge medical bills. He ended up on Social Security disability for the rest of his life and eventually died destitute.
Yeah, and he was only 45 years old at the time. He still had, some years left of entertaining fans.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But he did come back in another capacity in wrestling. He wasn't done. He still had the passion for it. He got the opportunity in Texas for Paul Bosch, and he went down there and he was going to manage. And there was a good friend of mine, Buddy Roberts. He ended up changing his name to Dale Valentine, a distant relative of Johnny Valentine.
Oh, yeah.
And Johnny Valentine managed Dale Valentine on some shows for Paul Bosch, down there.
And he came back to Detroit.
One last time. I didn't know this.
Yeah. We have some pictures that we can show you. It was a Bobo versus Sheik match, and Valentine came out to second Bobo Brazil. To no avail, though, because the Sheik did beat Bobo and won his title back. But one of the pictures, I think, shows Bobo clobbering the Sheik with one of JV's crutches.
Oh, wow. And that match was on May 15th, 1976. Yep. So almost a year after, his plane crash.
Right, yeah.
Oh, being with Johnny Valentine, that was, oh boy, that was something. I can remember, being at the Sheraton Cadillac Hotel, when the Tunnies would throw the parties, in the hotel bar, and our good friend Les Ruffin, right in the middle of everything.
Les was the promoter in Cincinnati and Dayton, former wrestler.
Yep.
And a character.
And, everybody's, drinking. At that time, I was only 17, 18 years old. I didn't drink alcohol at all. But, Johnny Valentine, he'd get there after the Cobo show, and he'd have to take his medication. And his medication, I just couldn't believe it. It was a tinfoil pouch about the size of a small baseball that held like 40 pills, 40 different pills. And I remember him telling me at one time he had to take this like 4 times a day.
Oh, bro.
Oh, God. And he would just take a handful of them at a time, put them in his mouth, and take his beer, slug it down, another thing, and slug it down.
Because that's what you want to do, is take a lot of medication with alcohol.
Yeah.
Sure.
And the other thing about Johnny Valentine that I remember, his ribs. I'm not talking about food. I'm talking about, the jokes and the pranks and the things that, wrestlers pull on each other. But Johnny Valentine wasn't the fun kind of prankster.
Not
he
always.
was known to, take it to the nth degree, let's say, and not on a good side.
Yeah, there was a dark side to him. Many people believe he was sadistic, masochistic, but he had a very, very dark sense of humor, and which some people would call obviously cruel.
Yes. Don't you remember the one time with, wasn't it the Alaskan Jay York?
Yeah, this is one of the more infamous ribs that Johnny Valentine pulled on someone. The Alaskan Jay York, who was a big star in Detroit here in the 60s, had asthma.
Yes.
Had an inhaler. And out he goes to the ring, and Johnny Valentine takes a look at that inhaler, and he dumped the contents and replaced it with lighter fluid. And Jay York came back to the dressing room after his match. He's winded, goes for that inhaler, snarps it up there, and realizes, of course, that I don't think he knew what it was at that point in time, but there wasn't a moment's hesitation. He knew exactly who had done that. Went out to his car, came back to the arena, made his way through the hallways with a shotgun.
Oh, no.
And he was after Valentine. And he caught Valentine walking out of the dressing room. According to Johnny's son, Greg, Johnny was carrying 2 suitcases. One was his and one was Buddy Rogers. And Jay York, the Alaskan, aimed that gun. He says, "I know it was you." Now, whether he intended for the bullet to hit where it did, who knows? But he missed Johnny Valentine and put a slug through Buddy Rogers' suitcase.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Yeah, there'd be a few times, those ribs that I saw. We'd be at the Sheridan bar, he'd be at the, bar drinking with Les and the Tunnies and, the other boys. And somebody would walk in, it could be, one of us, it could have been just somebody, a hotel guest. And he would ask the bartender for a glass of ice, a tall glass of ice. And he would take it and he'd put it underneath, the table, at the bar. And I guess he'd unzip his pants and, take a little whiz in there and then go up to an unsuspecting person. "Here, I'll buy you a drink." Things like that, those are the bad kind of ribs that Johnny Valentine would do. And
Always a character.
Yeah, he was a character. And
Yeah.
speaking of another character, that son of his who made a name for himself in the wrestling business.
He did. Greg the Hammer Valentine started here, was trained in part by the Noble Sheik up in Williamston, Michigan. It began as, was it Babyface? Was that the first
Babyface
name?
Nelson.
Yeah.
Boy, you're really tapping my brain on that one.
Yeah.
Boy, but
That
it
was
came back.
That was the first name that he used.
He managed Donnie Fargo.
And then became Johnny Fargo, all
Right.
here in the space of 1 week he's there with the top hat and the tails as Babyface Nelson, the manager. Next week he's Johnny Fargo, the manager, and did really, really well here, also in Cleveland, then down to Texas and other areas. And the rest is history.
History was made by him in the WWF, the WWE,
No, absolutely.
and the Crockett territory. Yeah, Greg Valentine, chip off the old block. But the thing, I would, wonder about, and I don't know this for a fact, maybe, one of you fans can write in and, answer this. Do you ever recall a time when Johnny Valentine and Greg Valentine were on the same card?
No. And I can remember when Greg started in the business, wherever they were, somehow it came up and he was referred to as Johnny's brother because the promoters didn't want fans to think that JV was old enough to have a son in his 20s.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about a few other things, away from wrestling, about Johnny Valentine. Back in the 60s, did you know he had a wrestling school?
No.
Yeah. I found a paper that, you fans can see now, that, Johnny Valentine had a wrestling school. And I guess he wrote a wrestling book, how to be a wrestler.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I mean, fans, are seeing it here. And also, do you remember Johnny Valentine had two separate fan clubs? One run by Jim Dillinger, who ended up being, J.J. Dillon of the Four Horsemen.
I'll be darned.
And then, he ran that one out of the East Coast. And another fan friend of ours, Dawn Porter, ran the Johnny Valentine fan club here in Detroit in Big Time Wrestling.
Another interesting bit of trivia about Johnny Valentine, we've all heard of Antonio Inoki, along with Giant Baba, one of the two big all-time stars of course, Ricky Dozan earlier. But Inoki was just a huge star, owner of the New Japan promotion, but he really was launched into stardom at the age of 23 with a victory over Johnny Valentine.
Wow.
He had such credibility in Japan that when Inoki beat him, that elevated Inoki to the point of superstardom.
Yeah, not too many people can claim a victory over Johnny Valentine.
That's for sure.
And in 2006, after, a great wrestling career, he was rewarded for that by being elected into the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, in New York. not the WWE Hall of Fame that doesn't exist. We're talking about the true Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame that has a building and memorabilia, beyond belief.
Some Dave Drayson outfits.
Yeah, my outfit is in the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame.
Enshrined forever.
But unfortunately, at the age of 72, after a long career and an unfortunate accident, Johnny Valentine passed away April 24th, 2001. And if anything I can say about Johnny Valentine, it was the one famous saying he had. And he was famous for saying, "I can't make you believe pro wrestling is real, but I sure as hell can make you believe that I am." And in closing, in tribute to Johnny Valentine, Terry, can you give a final ring announcement as you...
With pleasure. My honor. From Dallas, Texas, weighing 250 pounds, Johnny Valentine.
I'm really proud to say that I'm a part of IBW.
I take pride in IBW that we are a family-run company.
It's a fight. It's a sport. At IBW, tradition has always mattered.
You're going to see world-class professional big-time wrestling at its best.
This ain't no sports entertainment. This is professional wrestling.
International Big-Time Wrestling's The Fix. Each and every week, your fix of IBW action. You want entertainment? Look no further than RoX-TV. International Big-Time Wrestling!
Wrestling fans, if you like what you've seen, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and also don't forget to ring that bell.